Welcome to Wrldwire, the podcast that takes you beyond the headlines to explore the forces truly shaping our world today. We bring you thoughtful, in-depth analysis on global issues, from shifting power dynamics to economic alliances and everything in between.
Okay, so get this. Data is like the new oil. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving deep into who controls that oil. Digitally speaking, of course, we're talking about digital sovereignty. And get this, it affects you even if you've never heard of it. It's basically a country's power to control its own digital space, like its data, its tech, and its online security. We've got some really interesting research and news for this deep dive, and let me tell you, things are getting intense. We're talking cyberattacks nations battling it out for control. It's a whole power struggle in the digital world that's going to shape the future for all of us.
Yeah, it's interesting. People think of digital sovereignty as this big abstract idea, but really it boils down to three main things: where your data is stored, who runs the technology, and who's in charge of essential online services. It's about who holds the power in this increasingly digital world.
Okay, so let's break that down. You mentioned data storage. What's the big deal about where our data is kept?
Well, think about it. Data is valuable, right?
Oh.
Countries are realizing this, and they want to keep that valuable data within their own borders. It's called data localization, and it's a huge part of this whole digital sovereignty thing. We're seeing it everywhere. India and Russia have really strict laws about this. Companies have to store data locally. Even the European Union with their GDPR, they're all about regulating how data is handled.
So it's kind of like keeping your valuables in a safe that you control, not letting someone else hold the key. But why are countries so focused on this? Is it all about economics?
Well, yeah, it's definitely about economics, but it's more than that. It's about security, too. Countries want to be sure they can access their own citizens' data if they need to, and they're worried about other countries having that kind of power. There's this growing concern about foreign surveillance, too, the idea that another country could be spying on citizens through their data.
Okay, that's a little unsettling. Makes you wonder where your own data is going and who might be looking at it, right? So data location is one thing, but you also mentioned controlling the technology itself.
Right, exactly. The second big part of digital sovereignty is being less reliant on other countries for technology, especially countries that are like rivals on the world stage. And this is where things get really interesting. It's almost like a digital arms race.
A digital arms race.
Yeah.
I like that. So who's leading the charge in this race?
Well, China's a major player. They've invested heavily in building their own tech systems, with companies like Huawei and Alibaba going head-to-head with the big U.S. companies. And then you've got the Great Firewall, which gives them massive control over what their citizens see online.
Wow, that's pretty extreme, blocking a whole country off from the rest of the internet. Are other countries doing anything similar?
Well, nothing quite as drastic as that, but the European Union's making some moves, too. They've got this thing called geopolitics. It's all about building their own cloud infrastructure, so they don't have to rely on U.S. companies as much, like Amazon and Microsoft.
So you've got these two very different approaches. China building a wall, and the EU making their own alternative, but both with the same goal: more control.
Right. It all boils down to being in control of your own digital future, not having to rely on anyone else, especially now when technology is so tied up with power and security.
Okay, I see what you mean. We've got the data location, the tech independence. What's the third piece?
The third piece is control over critical digital infrastructure. Stuff like the telecommunications networks, online payment systems, even the power grid. These are the essential services our digital lives depend on. And countries are realizing they need to have a tight grip on them.
So it's like making sure you've got the keys to your own house,
Right.
Not relying on someone else to let you in. So a country needs to control these systems if they want digital sovereignty.
Exactly. And it's more than just keeping them running. It's about being able to guide how they change in the future. Take central bank digital currencies, for example, or CBDCs, as they're called.
CBDCs, I've heard of those.
Yeah.
That's digital money issued by a government central bank, right?
Yeah.
That's right. And it's a really interesting example of how digital sovereignty plays out in finance. Imagine a government with its own digital currency. They could potentially see every transaction, even control how that money is being used, maybe even enforce sanctions more effectively, or promote certain economic activities.
Wow. So it's a tool for control, but also a tool for influence economically, even on a global scale. Makes you think how CBDCs will change the balance of power in the future.
Yeah, it really does. And it's just one example of how digital sovereignty is changing how we view power and influence in the 21st century.
Okay, so we got these three pillars: data tech and infrastructure. But all of that seems pretty vulnerable to attack, doesn't it? How does cybersecurity play into all of this?
Cybersecurity is like the front line in any country's plan for digital sovereignty. It's a key part of any nation's security. Think of it like building a fortress around your digital stuff, and the threats are everywhere.
And these aren't just like theoretical threats, right? I mean, these attacks are happening all the time, aren't they? Absolutely. We're talking state-sponsored hacking, ransomware attacks that can cripple businesses and even essential services. And the lines are getting blurry between warfare and espionage as countries develop and use offensive cyber weapons.
It's a bit scary to think about, especially for someone like me who's not really a tech person. Where are these attacks coming from?
Well, some of the most advanced attacks are coming from nation-states. Countries like Russia, China, and North Korea, they're all known for using cyberattacks to get what they want.
So actual governments are hacking into other countries' systems. What are they looking for?
It depends on the country and their goals. Some want sensitive information, like military secrets, government plans, even intellectual property stolen from companies. Others want to disrupt things like power grids or financial systems. It's all about getting a leg up in this new digital battleground.
And they're actually succeeding. They're getting into these systems.
Yeah, unfortunately they are. There have been some big examples in recent years that really show how vulnerable even supposedly secure systems can be. Remember the SolarWinds attack a few years back?
Yeah, I vaguely remember hearing about that. What happened?
Well, it was a supply chain attack, meaning the hackers got into a software update from this company called SolarWinds, and this software was used by tons of organizations, including U.S. government agencies, and it gave the hackers a backdoor into their systems.
Wow. So they just snuck in through a regular software update. That's pretty clever. And scary.
It is, and the effects were huge. They were able to steal sensitive data, and they could have even planted malware that could have been used for even more damaging attacks.
That's a pretty stark example of how vulnerable even the most powerful countries are these days.
It is, and it shows why cybersecurity is so vital to any nation's digital sovereignty strategy. You can have the best technology and the tightest control over your data, but if you don't protect your systems, you're still at risk. And it's not just about stopping attacks from other countries. You've got cybercriminals too, and they're getting more daring and smarter every day.
Yeah, ransomware attacks. Aren't those becoming more common?
They are. And they're not just going after individuals or small businesses anymore. They're targeting critical infrastructure, like hospitals, energy grids, transportation systems, anything that could really disrupt things if it's taken offline.
That sounds kind of terrifying. What happens in one of those attacks? Do they just shut down everything and demand money to turn it back on?
Basically, yeah. They lock up the data on the system so the owners can't access it, and then they demand a ransom to give them the key, usually in cryptocurrency. And those ransoms are getting huge, millions of dollars sometimes.
So it's like a digital kidnapping. They take your data hostage. But why go after critical infrastructure? Is it just about the money?
Money's a big part of it for sure. But there's also a strategic element. By attacking essential services, they can cause chaos and disruption, which impacts a country's economy and even its national security.
Right. You mentioned hospitals being targeted. I remember reading about this ransomware attack on a European hospital a while back. They had to cancel surgeries and divert ambulances because their systems were down.
Exactly. Now imagine that happening to a power grid. Blackouts, problems with transportation, even emergency services being affected. The potential consequences are enormous.
That's a chilling thought. It makes you realize how fragile our digital world is. We rely on these systems so much, and one attack can just stop everything.
It really does highlight our vulnerabilities. And it's not just the immediate impact. There's long-term damage to consider, too.
What do you mean by long-term damage?
Well, think about the reputation of a company or a government. If their systems are breached, there's also a loss of trust. If people aren't sure their data is safe, or if essential services might not be available. It undermines confidence in the whole digital world.
Right, like a domino effect. One attack can have consequences for years. So we've got these attacks by nation states, we've got cyber criminals, and then there's this whole murky world of cyber espionage. And weaponizing cyber tools, what's that all about?
It's complicated. And it's getting harder to tell the difference between criminal activity and state-sponsored espionage. Governments are developing really advanced cyber weapons That can be used for surveillance sabotage and even information warfare.
Cyber weapons. Sounds like something out of a movie. What are we talking about here?
We're talking about malware that can get into computer systems, steal data, or disrupt critical infrastructure. Think about Stuxnet, that virus that was supposedly developed by the US and Israel to sabotage Iran's nuclear program. Or more recently, Pegasus spyware, which is used to target journalists, activists, and even government officials.
So they're using these cyber weapons against individuals now, not just governments or companies.
Yeah, and that's one of the most worrying parts of this. These tools are incredibly powerful. They can be used to silence dissent, suppress free speech, even undermine democracy.
It sounds like we're heading towards a pretty bleak future if governments can just spy on and silence anyone they don't agree with.
It's a real concern. And it raises some serious ethical questions about digital sovereignty. If a government has total control over its digital space, how do we make sure they don't abuse that power?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And it's something we'll have to figure out as this whole digital sovereignty thing keeps changing.
Exactly. And it's changing fast. With new trends emerging all the time, one thing we're seeing is regional tech alliances forming. Countries are teaming up to boost their digital defenses.
It's like countries are realizing they can't go it alone in this digital arms race. They have to work together.
Exactly. Take the European Union, for example. They're trying to become more self-reliant in technology. And they're doing it through things like the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, which are designed to limit the power of big tech and help European tech companies grow.
So they're kind of creating their own tech world, like a
Yeah.
European version of Silicon Valley.
In a way, yeah. They want to depend less on those big American tech companies. And they see this as a way to make their digital sovereignty stronger. They're also putting a lot of money into cybersecurity and working on common standards and rules to protect their digital infrastructure.
So they're really going for it, taking digital sovereignty seriously. But not every country is working together like this, are they?
No, you're right. Some countries are taking a more go-it-alone approach, putting in place what they call national internet policies, which basically creates a divided internet, sometimes called a splinternet.
We talked about the splinternet earlier.
Yeah.
But you keep mentioning it. Can you explain what it means? I don't think I really get it.
Imagine the internet, which we all think of as this connected global network, breaking up into separate, isolated networks. Each country would have its own internet, with its own rules.
So instead of one big highway, we'd have all these little side roads, each controlled by a different government.
That's a good way to picture it. And it's already happening in some places. China, with its Great Firewall, is the most famous example. They control what their people can access online very tightly, blocking websites and services they think are a problem.
Yeah, I've heard about that. But is China the only one doing this?
No, Russia's been building its own version of a national internet called Runet. It's designed to work even if it's cut off from the rest of the world. They've even done tests where they've disconnected from the global internet for a while.
Wow. So it's like they're prepping for a digital iron curtain where they can just shut themselves off if they need to.
Exactly. And while the reasons for these national internet policies might be different, the goal is the same: more control over what information flows within their borders.
It's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
But I can see why some governments would want to do that, especially if there's conflict or political instability. But what about innovation and working together? Wouldn't a fragmented internet be bad for that?
Absolutely. The internet, as we know it, has thrived because it's open and connected. It's allowed information ideas and innovation to move freely across borders. A fragmented internet could slow down tech progress as countries become more isolated and less willing to share.
So it's a trade-off. More control might mean less innovation.
Yeah, potentially. And there are other possible downsides, too. A fragmented internet could make it harder for businesses to operate globally. They'd have to deal with a bunch of different rules and restrictions. It could also be harder for people to connect with each other across borders, which could have impacts on everything from social movements to scientific collaboration.
It sounds like the stakes are pretty high. But even with all these challenges, countries are still putting a lot of resources into cybersecurity. Why is that?
Because they're realizing cybersecurity isn't just an IT issue anymore. It's essential for national security. The potential damage from a cyber attack is just too big to ignore.
So it's not just about protecting data anymore. It's about protecting a country's whole digital world and everything that depends on it.
Exactly. And governments are taking this very seriously. In the US, for example, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, has been bumped up to a cabinet-level agency, which shows how important it is.
Wow. A whole agency just for cybersecurity. That's serious.
It is. And it's not just the U.S. Countries all over the world are setting up similar agencies and investing heavily in cybersecurity research and development, as well as training and education programs to get more cyber
So
experts.
it's like a whole new industry is popping up, all because of this global push for digital sovereignty.
You got it. And it's a fast-growing industry
Yeah.
with a huge need for skilled people who can protect our digital stuff from these evolving threats.
Sounds like an interesting but tough field to work in. But let's talk about another part of this digital power struggle, the race for 5G dominance. How does that fit into digital sovereignty?
5G. The next big thing in wireless tech has become a major battleground. It's not just about faster downloads, it's about who controls the infrastructure behind it and the data that flows through it.
I've heard about all the controversy around Huawei, that Chinese tech company. What's that about?
Huawei is a major provider of 5G equipment, but the US and some of its allies are worried about security risks if they use it. They think Huawei's close ties to the Chinese government could open the door to spying or sabotage.
So it's not just about the tech itself, it's about who's behind it
Yeah.
and their motives.
Exactly. And it's become a big issue between the US and China, with the US trying to get a global ban on Huawei stuff.
So it's like a digital Cold War, with these two superpowers fighting for control of the tech world.
It's a good comparison. And the result of this competition could have huge implications for digital sovereignty. If China becomes the main player in 5G, it could give them a real advantage in controlling data and shaping future technologies.
It sounds like actually achieving digital sovereignty is really hard. There's so many obstacles, from economic dependencies to cybersecurity threats to this global competition. Is it even realistic for countries to think they can be truly independent in this digital world?
It's definitely not easy, and there's no one solution that works for everyone. The way a country approaches it will depend on its situation, its resources, and what it wants to achieve.
But even with all that, why are countries so set on pursuing digital sovereignty? What are the benefits?
The benefits are huge, both for national security and economic competitiveness. Countries that can control their own digital world are less vulnerable to outside influence, and they have more freedom to make their own economic and social policies.
So it's about more than just data. It's about a country's independence and its ability to choose its own path in this digital world.
Exactly. And it's about making sure the benefits of the digital revolution are shared widely, not just held by a few powerful tech companies or governments.
That's a powerful thought. But let's be real. Getting to digital sovereignty isn't easy, is it? What are some of the toughest challenges countries face in trying to become digitally independent?
One of the biggest is economic dependence. Lots of countries, especially developing nations, rely heavily on foreign tech companies for everything, from software to hardware to basic internet service.
So it's like trying to build something without the right tools. You're at a disadvantage from the start.
Exactly. And this reliance can create a bad cycle. Developing nations often struggle to build their own digital infrastructure because they don't have the money or the expertise, so they end up relying on foreign companies, which makes those companies even more powerful in their digital world.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah.
But even if a country can get over the economic hurdles, there are still ethical and political challenges, right?
Absolutely. One of the biggest is balancing privacy with surveillance. Digital sovereignty often makes governments want to increase their control over the internet, and while some level of control might be necessary for security, it can easily go too far.
Because if a government controls the internet completely, they can easily censor things and stop people from speaking out.
Exactly. And this tension between security and freedom is a core issue in the digital sovereignty debate. Look at India, for example. Their data localization laws have been praised for promoting data security, but they've also been criticized for allowing too much government surveillance. It's a warning about how digital sovereignty can be used to take away individual rights.
So it's not just about protecting data from other countries, it's also about protecting citizens from their own governments.
That's a crucial point. And it gets even trickier when we think about global tech fragmentation. The push for digital sovereignty could accidentally lead to a splintered internet, with each country operating in its own little bubble.
We talked about the splinter net before,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like a real possibility if everyone goes down this path of isolationism.
It is a worry. And while some regional cooperation might happen, the risk is that we end up with a fragmented digital world. That makes innovation and collaboration harder. Imagine a world where global trade communication and even scientific research become tougher because of incompatible systems and rules.
Yeah, it'd be like taking a step back in terms of global connection.
Exactly. It would stifle the free flow of information and ideas. which has been one of the main drivers of progress in the digital age.
It's a tough balancing act. Countries want to protect themselves and their people, but they also need to think about the bigger impact their actions might have on the digital world as a whole.
Precisely. And there's another challenge that's often forgotten in this discussion: the cybersecurity skills gap. A lot of countries just don't have enough qualified cybersecurity people to really protect their digital infrastructure. It's a worldwide problem, and it's only getting worse as the threats become more complex.
So even if you have the best tech and the strictest rules, you're still open to attack if you don't have the right people running things.
Exactly. It's like having a top-of-the-line security system at home, but not knowing how to use it. You're still leaving yourself vulnerable.
We've covered a lot of complex stuff here. With all these challenges and different goals, is digital sovereignty even possible? And why should we even care about it?
Those are good questions. And the truth is, digital sovereignty is incredibly complex. There's no easy fix. And it's probably going to be a constant process, with compromises along the way. But understanding why it matters is crucial. It's at the heart of some of the biggest issues and possibilities in the world today.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. Why should you, the listener, care about this whole digital sovereignty thing? How does it affect your life?
At its core, digital sovereignty is about power. Who controls the digital world? The data that flows through it, the infrastructure that supports it. And that power has a huge impact on your freedom, your economic well-being, and global security.
So it's not just a bunch of tech talk. It has real consequences for all of us.
Absolutely. Think about it this way. In the past, nations fought over land resources and trade routes. Today, those battles are happening more and more in the digital world.
So cyberspace is like the new battleground for countries.
In a lot of ways, it already is. And the stakes are high. Control over tech, cybersecurity, and data will decide who has the power in the 21st century.
And that power can be used for good or bad. We've already talked about how digital sovereignty can be used to increase surveillance and limit freedoms. But are there any good things about it?
Yes, there are. Digital sovereignty can help boost economic growth, protect national security, and even support democracy. For example, countries that can build their own digital infrastructure and tech can create jobs, encourage innovation, and become less reliant on foreign powers.
So it's about giving countries more control over their own futures in this digital age.
You got it. And it can also help protect citizens from online threats, whether it's cyber attacks from other governments or criminals.
But how do we balance the need for security with protecting individual rights? Seems tricky.
It is tricky. It's like a tightrope walk, expert speaker. And it's at the core of this whole digital sovereignty thing, expert speaker. What's really interesting is that it creates this tension, expert speaker, between a country's interests and the idea of a global internet expert speaker. It's almost like we're at a crossroads.
Right, it's like a tug of war. On one side, you've got the forces of globalization. That's been driving the growth of the internet for decades. And on the other, you've got countries wanting more control over their own digital space. It's like two different ways of thinking clashing. Makes you wonder who's going to win.
Hard to say for sure, but whoever wins will have a huge impact on the future of the internet. Will it stay this open and connected space, or will it split into all these national networks, each with their own level of control and censorship? It's a question we should all be asking, especially if we value things like free speech and access to information.
Yeah, it's kind of unsettling to think about. And what about the economic side of things? Could a more fragmented internet actually hurt global trade and innovation?
It could. It's definitely a possibility. If the internet becomes more fragmented, it could mess with global trade innovation and collaboration. We might see slower economic growth and more protectionist policies. This isn't just theory. It has real consequences for everyone.
It really shows that this whole digital sovereignty issue isn't just about governments and tech companies. It's about all of us.
Right.
And the kind of digital world we want to live in.
Exactly. Digital sovereignty is often talked about as a national issue, but it affects individuals in a big way. It's about your privacy, your freedom to express yourself, and your access to information.
So if you're listening, you might be thinking, okay, this is all interesting, but what can I do about it? It can feel overwhelming, especially if you're not a tech expert.
You're right. It can feel that way. But there are things you can do. First, educate yourself about the issues. Read articles. Listen to podcasts. Talk to people who know about digital sovereignty. The more you know. the better you can make informed decisions.
Right. Being informed is key.
Yeah.
What else can people do? How can they make their voices heard?
Support organizations that fight for digital rights and freedom. There are groups all over the world working to keep the internet open, accessible, and free from censorship. They need our help, whether it's through donations, volunteering, or just spreading the word.
So we can put our money and time where our values are. What else?
Hold your elected officials accountable. Tell them you care about digital sovereignty and that you want them to make decisions that protect your rights. They work for us, after all.
Right. We have a say in this. It's not just up to the tech giants and governments. We, the users, have a role to play too.
Exactly. The future of the internet isn't set in stone. It's something we can all shape through our actions and choices.
That's pretty inspiring. We've covered a lot today. From the basics of digital sovereignty to the challenges and opportunities, we talked about the impact on national security, economic competition, individual freedoms, and even the future of the internet itself.
It's always changing. And there are no easy answers. But one thing's for sure, digital sovereignty is reshaping the world. And it's something we all need to be aware of.
Absolutely. As we move further into the digital age, the choices we make will determine what kind of future we have. One where a few people have all the power, or one where power is more balanced, and individuals have more control over their data and their lives online.
It's a future worth fighting for. And it starts with understanding the issues, joining the conversation, and holding those in power accountable.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of digital sovereignty. We hope you learned something new and that you're ready to help shape the future of the digital world.
Thanks for tuning in to Wrldwire. We hope today's episode gave you new insights and a fresh perspective on global events. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe and share. Help us reach more listeners who care about unbiased, in-depth analysis. At Wrldwire, we believe in looking beyond the headlines. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep questioning the world around you.